her. Oh yes, I'm gonna admit her.
Okay, it's going live right now.
Okay, I'm admitting Sabra.
Okay. Let me know once. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Hey
Shear.
Sabra. Can you hear us? You're muted and your video is off, Sabra. But you're
unmute, and I want to put my video on. I'm going to change over to my laptop though, so I guess I need another link.
okay. Well, then you need to. I will email you the link. You got to do the same thing. You register.
Okay.
But all good. It takes 2 seconds.
All right.
And we've got intros and stuff. So
Okay.
it'll
We
be
are
live 5 or 10 minutes.
And I pushed to Facebook, or I shared it on the Forsberg Facebook.
Okay.
So we're good to go.
Okay.
Okay, and I will admit everyone now.
Sabra just sent that to you.
Welcome, everybody. We're just waiting for people to join in. This is the second episode of the year of our Forest Fridays. And I'll give it a couple of minutes so that people can log in and join us. All right. We're good to go.
Okay, I'm gonna go.
Are we good to go? Good to go? Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is our second episode of the year and our 10th episode of Forest Fridays. This is brought to you by the Kauaʻi Invasive Species Committee and the Kauaʻi Forest Bird Recovery Project. My name is Julia Diekman and I work with the forest birds, and we also have Halen Chuck and Kim Rogers from KISC here. Maybe they can both say hello and wave to all of you. We are here today to give you an update on Kauai's forest bird conservation. And our question today is, how much loss can our forest take? So we will start exploring that throughout this afternoon. We have a welcome that we have put together with Kumu Keahi Manea. And also we have some lovely footage of our birds to go with that. Kumu Keahi is a member of the Ka'imi Na'au o Hawaii Nei Institute, and she has been supporting the Kaua'i Forest Bird Recovery Project for several years. And I'm going to share a video with you and a greeting that she made for us. Let me see if you can see that. Okay, perfect.
Velina mai ke aloha e ngā lei mō kupuni o ngā kai e walu. I ka pā mai o ka makani ahe ahe, e moani mai ne ke alo o ka lehua makanoe. E ho'olohe kākou i ngā māpuna leo nahe nahe o ngā manu wau na hele. Aloha awina la kākou. Ki hahau oli mākou ka Po'e Forest Bird Recovery Project. E ho'olau na hou ia o kou I e lua limahana mālama manu. O ia hoi o kauka Cali Crampton, lawa o Justin Haidt. A nā lawa e hoi ke ana no ke kule ana manu o iwi ma alaka'i ke ia manawa. A hau oli no ho'i mākou I ke kipa ana mai o kumu Sabra kauka, laua o Chucky Boy Chuck. Nā laua e ho'ike ia kākou I ka waiwai o ka nahele a me ka hana ahu ula. Mahalo kei o hui ana kākou. E ho'omaka kākou.
All right, that was our greeting and our opening of the event from Kumu Keahi. Now I would like everybody to head on over to our Mentimeter, and I'm going to put the link in the chat because I have a question that you all can answer. Let's see. And here's the link. So it's in the chat. Please go to the Mentimeter and answer the question that you see on the screen. So you go to the link that I just put in the chat and you put in the code and then you just answer the question. And I'm going to share my screen again and see what people are responding. Okay, I see some people made it over there. So the question is, which of these native forest birds have you seen or heard? Apapana iiwi, pueo. Question, the answers are coming in. Lots of people have seen pueo. Awesome, awesome. Thank you for answering. Okay, so quite a bunch of people have seen pueo, apapana iiwi. Fewer people have seen akikiki and akeke'e and the puaiohi. All right, I think I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you very much for answering. And we will come back to that a little bit later. Now I'd like to welcome our panelists. We have some very awesome people who are joining us today, sharing their knowledge with us. We have Kumu Sabra Kauka. Helen, would you be able to spotlight her? And we have the Forsberg project leader, Cali Crampton. Hope she's here. Yes, she's here. Hi, Cali. And we also have Justin Haidt. I don't know if he made it. Yeah, there he is. Hi, Justin. And then we also have recordings of Chucky Boy Chuck, who is the director at the Kauaʻi Museum. He couldn't make it today, but we will show you some of his interviews later this afternoon. First, I would like to share some housekeeping things. We are doing a regular Zoom meeting. You're being recorded. You feel free to start your video, but please stay muted. If you would like a question, you can ask the question in the chat and just put it in there. Helen, Kim, and I, we will be monitoring and making sure that we answer all your questions. We can put this chat function to work now so that everybody can give it a try. If you would like to put in the chat where you're joining us from, we always love to see where people are joining us from. So you can maybe write down your moku, ahupua'a, maybe your mauna, why your town. You can just put it in the chat so that we know where you're from. That would be awesome. All right, thank you, thank you. I see so many different places. I see Kauaʻi, Minneapolis, Maui, Canada. How awesome. Thank you all for joining us here. Minnesota and Spain, how awesome. All right, with that, we would like to start our afternoon with something that Helen has put together. She went and interviewed Chucky Boy Chuck, who is the director as the Kauaʻi Museum, and I'm gonna turn it over to Helen to tell you a little bit about that.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So I had the privilege to sit down with Chucky Boy Chuck, who is a well-known song composer. He's a poet. He's also a very enthusiastic historian here on Kauaʻi. So if you guys ever get a chance to go to the Kauaʻi Museum, I highly recommend it, and check out all of the really cool exhibits they have. I know they have a really awesome KAPAʻA exhibit right now, Kumu Sabra. I'm sure you're familiar. And then I was able to sit down and talk to him about his mana'o regarding feather work, as well as bird catching, in terms of the ancient days and how they were caught, how they were used, and cultural significance of certain exhibits they have. So that would include kahili and ahu'ula, or feather capes. So throughout today, we'll be sharing smaller clips of his interview. So I will go ahead and share the first clip, and let me just share my screen. Okay, can I get a thumbs up if y'all can see that and hear that? Okay, awesome.
Hello, my kako, kahale ho ʻakeke'e o ka ia neli hau o Chucky Boy Cha o ino. I'm Chucky Boy, and I'm privileged to serve the community by being here to care for all the artifacts and antiquities that we have here at this beautiful institution. It's a privilege to be here. And we're here to tell the stories of Kauaʻi and Mosquito. And every day it's a new adventure here to be part of this institution, because we have the privilege of being in that archives and going through literature, ancient writings and stuff, and trying to decipher chants and so forth. But we have that great distinction of being the eyes and ears for our community. So that part I really like. To put it in I'll put it in a nutshell. The mission really here is to tell the stories of Kauaʻi cultures, ethnic cultures, its people, contributions, and what makes Kauaʻi really special. There's many stories pertaining to that. You know, one of our platforms here is Kauaʻi, a separate kingdom. And why is that? And I love that platform because, especially for our visitors, and I take them back to the beginnings. You know, Hawaiians, we are about trees, feathers, oceans, you know, and so forth. And when it comes to feathers, ahili, we all know it's the symbol of nobility. It pertains to the alii, chiefs only. In fact, before kahili, you go right to the kiomanu, the bird catchers. You know, the bird catchers is such an important part of tradition. The gatherers, of feathers. And, you know, to put it in context, you know, the kiomanu, they have other names for bird catchers. The kiomanu, there are different regions, different parts of the mountain. The Wapkele, but the Wawakua is the highest part of the mountain. That's where that sacred part of the mountain is where really the special birds will be found. The bomb. But these bird catchers, they literally lived and became like the birds. They literally mimicked the birds. But because they lived in the forest, the birds, there were birds that trusted them because they were part of the forest. You know, they would never come out. Rare. I mean, the fingernails are really long, and the stories of that. But there are several techniques of gathering food, gathering the feathers, and sometimes we have visitors that come to the museum. They say, "Why did you guys kill the birds?" And I said, "Oh, wait a minute, I'll tell you a story real quick. You know, because we're people that highly respect nature, we live side by side with everything that surrounds us as Hawaiian people. So we, our kuleana, our responsibility was to really respect the surroundings. So no, we.
Okay, and we're going to have our next panelist before we move on to our next clip regarding our feather capes. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Julia again.
All right, thank you, Helen. That was awesome. It looks like he's full of like great stories. I can't wait to hear more of what he has to share later. I forgot to mention earlier that if you're joining us from Facebook, you can also submit questions. Just put them as comments in Facebook, and we will monitor both the KISC Facebook site and the KFBRP Facebook site. So if you're joining us from Facebook, please, you can also ask questions, just put them in the comments there. Right now, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Kumu Sabra Kauka, and Kim Rogers from KISC. Kim, I give you the virtual floor.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Sabra, for joining us this afternoon, evening. Appreciate your presence. I'm going to do a quick introduction of Sabra for maybe the one or two people in our audience who might not know her. Kumu Sabra has taught hundreds of students in her Hawaiian Cultural Studies class at Island School. She also heads the cultural subcommittee for the Lehua Island Restoration Advisory Committee. She has worked with the state and Kauaʻi Save Our Shearwaters program for decades, providing a blessing for the season's first cohort of fallout birds before their release and a second chance at what we hope will be a very long life. In March, our very own mayor, Derek Kawakami, proclaimed Saturday, May 19th, 2022 as Sabra Kauka Day, and it was a magnificent day at that. On that day, she was also named a citizen conservationist by Hawaii DLNR for her outstanding lifelong contributions to the betterment of natural resources and cultural resources on Kauaʻi and across Hawaii. At the very same luncheon, she was also recognized by Keoki's Paradise as their first Ho'oulu Award E for her dedication and energy to keeping things vibrant, to perpetuating traditions that inspire others, and for showing community engagement in culture, science, and biocultural diversity. As you can tell, Sabra is a very busy woman. I first met her, though, close to 20 years ago, I want to say, at Nualolo Kai along Napali Coast with a contingent of outrigger canoe paddlers endeavoring to paddle around Kauaʻi and over to Ni'ihau. Do you remember that, Sabra?
I do.
That was a magnificent and magical experience. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Mahalo nui loa. Aloha no kako o wao no Sabra lo ana kauka mai Kauaʻi mai. Noho wao ma lihu e. I ka ahupua'a o Kalapaki. I ka moku o Puna. So I'm delighted to be here with all of you today. As just already saw an old friend from living up there in Volcano, but wonderful to be here. And I love the video on Chucky Boy. Did you guys put those birds in there on purpose, or were they actually chirping all around him as he spoke? How perfect.
Yes, how perfect.
I've got some out here chirping up a storm too.
I do believe I hear them. Yes. Yeah.
But my kolea has flown. I haven't seen him since the 28th of April. And what do I have left here? Minor birds, lots of minor birds.
Yes, the irony, of course, is that the birds that we heard in Chucky Boy's video and in the background at your house are probably not native. And unfortunately, their last refuges in the mountaintops of our mountains are in peril, which we will hear more about today. But I'd love to hear from you. I'd like to step back a second, if you would, and let's talk about forests in general and Kauaʻi forests. I'd love to hear from you kind of your personal experience with our forests on Kauaʻi, your personal relationship, when you go to the forest, maybe why, what's your experience with Kauaʻi's forests, if you don't mind?
I've had a very close relationship to forests since I was a child because I had an uncle who was a forester, and he took us hiking all over the mountains. Actually, mostly on Oahu, but I've always loved hiking and being in the forest. And I came home in 1987, which is what, about 35 years ago now, something like that. And I was spending a great deal of time in Koke'e on the west side, and then in Koke'e, just loving it because it was very close to, I moved here from Alaska, and I loved Alaska. Actually, it's my second love, of any state in the Union, because of the outdoors life there. And over the years, over these 35 years, I have seen changes in our forest and in our birds. Now, Keahi Manea was on earlier. She did the introduction, and that particular halau has been instrumental in caretaking a site called Pohakuhula up in Koke'e. And I took my students up there a few months ago to do some service work in that area with Kauaʻi Invasive Katie Castle's project.
Koke'e, KRCP,
right.
Koke'e Resource Conservation Program. A magnificent group, yes.
A tremendous amount of work.
Absolutely.
And we hand pulled over 1,000 kahili ginger. I lost 1,200. Good thing they had the little counters because they were keeping track of them. But I remember seeing that place 30, 35 years ago and how abundant the native species were and how abundant the birds were. And over the years, the native species have been inundated by invasive species like the kahili ginger and others. And, I didn't have a sound meter at the time. I didn't have anything to measure sound, but the forests have unfortunately been getting more and more quiet. And that concerns me. That concerns me. So you mentioned the Shearwater project as well. I have enjoyed releasing the Shearwaters and having my students experience it. But the last time we did it was 2 years ago or something now.
Right.
Even though last year we did have a small group down on South Shore at Makahuena with Andre. And just a small group. I think his children were there to be the students and maybe a couple other kids, but it wasn't a whole class of students. And I didn't have the Hawaiian Studies kupuna with me. But the last time we did the release at Lidgate Park, I brought the kupuna there, the Hawaiian, all these wonderful people who teach Hawaiian Studies on Kauaʻi. Because there was one in particular who she had a grandson who was playing football. And she didn't want him playing in the hot sun in the light of day. And why can't they play at night? Oh, because the lights will attract the birds and and she didn't feel for the birds. So guess who was the first person I set in place to hold that bird and show it to the children and release it? Feel it beating in her hand and release it. And that totally changed her outlook. That totally changed her on it. But I think the work that you all are doing is tremendously important.
I'd like to jump in there on that idea where you're, down here in the coastal elevation, offers a little maybe more opportunity to introduce people to the lower elevation birds, whether they are water birds, you know, seeing nene around, or whether they are some of our coastal seabirds. Forest birds, though, you know, way up in the mountains. And now you mentioned that, you know, what you've seen over the years where the forest is quieter, and I would venture to say the forest is probably not as colorful as it once was, because of the loss of many of our forest birds. You know, that importance of bringing, you know, people and children in particular to experience these special creatures, right? And these birds that embody so much of the Hawaiian culture. I'd love to hear you talk about the forest birds in particular and their relationship with the Hawaiian culture as you know it, or maybe as you talk to your students about it, or your hula halau about it. You know, what is that connection you make? Because it's harder, right? When we're talking forest birds, it's harder to make that connection because you can't hold the bird in your hand. Yeah.
Well, in relationship to my students of my halau, I take them up to Kauaʻi. I am very fortunate to have a little cabin there. I now have to share it with 3 other friends because the lease rent has quadrupled, and I don't go up there as often as I used to years ago. But I take them up there on purpose to hike them to Kilohana, to hike them through Alaka'i Swamp, to introduce them to Pohakuhula and all these various places up there so that they become familiar with it, because a lot of the chants that they do speak about these places. And in order to really know the chant, you have to know the place. And it's just, I look at the pictures I've taken of these kids over the years and just been thrilled at their growth. And many, you know, several have chosen to go into Hawaiian studies or into environmental studies and these kinds of things because of their introduction to the forest. Now, again, this past 2 years, it's been difficult to take elementary up there because the Kauaʻi Discovery Center was closed. Even though you know, one of our teachers, Pat Geegan, was able to take them up to one of the one of the camps up there just a few weeks ago, but that was middle school kids. It's incredibly important to me that my students know all these beautiful places on Kauaʻi, and that our forest and everything that lives in it be one of them. So the last time I took my halau up, and I've done that hike to Kilohana so many times, and the trail has just, you know, gotten worse and worse and worse. I sent them on their way. I had a walkie-talkie, they had a walkie-talkie. I kept in touch with them, and I stayed at the top right above the stairs, and I sat there and I listened and I watched, and I could hear birds here and there. And again, I should have thought about recording them so I could, you know, send it to people like you and say, okay, now what bird was this that I heard, you know? But really, really great stuff that I love to do with them. And I hope that this COVID thing is lifting so that I can take my elementary students back up there and continue to take my senior students up.
Right, absolutely. I think it is so important to get, you know, to make that connection, to get them in the forest, and to sit. You know, one of the things about birding is it's about patience, right?
Oh,
you got to sit and wait and be quiet. And that's sometimes hard for children to do, but it's such a rewarding experience because it brings so much peace, right? In a stressful world that we live in, there is nothing like going up to the forest and just sitting in a quiet spot and listening to nature and taking it in.
Very much. And I must congratulate Mike Turuya as one of the people who really has the patience to record these birds, to know where to record them, know how to record them, watch, look, and listen. And it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. And he is, as Sabra mentions, Mike Turuya is an amazing photographer on our island and just a really gift, and takes a special interest in bird photography. And, that is a way that we are able to connect with these birds that are sometimes and oftentimes unseen. I'd like to ask one follow-up question to wrap up this segment of our talk this evening. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, Sabra, on, just what the impact to the Hawaiian culture about bird extinctions. Because last year there were 8 birds declared extinct across the state, which was dreadful. We're talking about other birds that might be extinct in a year or 2. What does that mean to the Hawaiian culture?
Oh my goodness. Birds have such an important part in our culture, in our history, and in even present day. Birds can fly where we cannot. Birds can reach higher heights than we can, which is why the ali'i, when they made the feather capes, this was to honor them. You are like a bird that flies, that climbs higher than all. And all my life, I've been fascinated with birds. I had a grandmother who was named Ka'iwa, and it was, but a Ka'iwa is a fern. It's the maidenhair fern, but there's a relationship with that fern to the Eva bird.
Right.
And my life is, what's that relationship? Well, somebody said, well, it's because they go up and they fertilize the ferns up in the mountain. They fly up there and they're in their opu, in their tummy, they have all these fish and things. And so that they provide nourishment to the Ka'iwa plant, the maidenhair fern and everything. So I've been trying to grow a maidenhair fern at my place. And one of them survived, the other one's not looking too good. And I must not have enough bird poop on it.
Well, I bet there's chickens around, it's not Eva scat, but
poop in the right place. I got to get them to poop on that plant. Yeah.
Well, in the right poop, I mean, oh my goodness, where we're going with this conversation. But I do want to say thank you so much, Sabra, for honoring us with your presence. And I hope you'll stick around in case we get some questions that pop up. But we are going to swing back right now to Julia and move on to the next segment of our evening.
Thank you so much, Kumu Sabra. That was super interesting and fascinating. Helen, do you have any questions that you saw on the Facebook page? I didn't see any.
Not in the chat. Let me just check Facebook, and nope, no questions here.
Okay, fantastic. Then we can just move on to your second clip of Chucky Boy.
Excellent.
So bird feathers, this is how special it was. Feathers were only gathered during molting season. And a great example of the respect that we have for these bird catchers is, sometimes you're lucky to get full feathers in a season, in a year, from the old 4 beautiful yellow feathers. We'll figure that out. Kamehameha is ahu'ula cloak with 1 million feathers. And most average around 250,000. So now, back to the feathers. It took generations to gather feathers to create the capes, the kahili, or whatever, or mahiole. It took years and years. But the Kiomanu, they lived there, what they were called to do. It was an honor to gather these feathers for the ali'i. Huge honor. And yes, they did eat birds, but the common ones at the time when we had millions of it, the i'iwi and the pundit, they did eat those. But no, they didn't just kill these birds randomly. It's at time when they were up there, they became food, yeah, but they did not kill the o'o, the mambo, not at all. These were gathered, and these o'o today, just recently, the o'o, in fact, the Kaua'i o'o has become extinct. there's another beautiful story about that too. You know, but so when we have visitors that say stuff like that, small little accusations about killing them, no, whatsoever like that. Everything we did here was with the highest of all reverence of our birds, feared them. So when it comes to kahili, you know, just simply put, it was you knew it was always done in pairs, and each chief, our chiefs and our Ali'i Moku, all the chiefs of each island, they had specific kahili. They had their own designs and colors, and they're given names, and they all came in pairs. But it was a tradition that we hold close to our deeply, because they were special. We made the best cordage they ever come across. So when one as thin as a thread was like a rope, as far as strip. Excuse me. So the olana made the the backing, the knitting of the cloak. The olana was used for many things, but for example, Kamehameha's clothes, I think it was 8 generations when they said, I'm gonna start gathering for the chief. Right? So it took generations to, I don't know what's the correct word, generations or decades to create this cloak. It was a million feathers for Kamehameha's cloak. So when the peace talks happened to Kamehameha and Kaua'i in 1810, Kamehameha gifted Kaua'i with a red mahioli, anything else special. So we have a replica of that here. And, because it was from the Kamehameha line, so you have that high crest. Kaua'i really preferred that we know. So Kamehameha III, there was a ship from England that was docked in Pakaka. We don't know who that word yet. We don't know the harbor side. And while docked, Kamehameha visited the ship. And on the ship, there was the Surgeon General of England. His name was Sloggett. So Kamehameha was injured. So Dr. Sloggett, Surgeon General, fixed him up. Kamehameha. So he had nothing to pay the doctor, and he said, what can I give you? And the doctor said, no, don't have to. So he took off his arm and he gave it to the Dr. Sloggett, Surgeon General, as a gift or as payment. As payment. Fast forward, years later, that same ahu was in the Surgeon General's home on a wall. So the Sloggett family from Kauaʻi, looking at it, and stories like that, they seized the owl and said, telling the story about it. So the story was told, and they decided to send it back home to Kauaʻi. Yeah, to the Sloggett family here.
All right, so that was a short section of Uncle Chucky Boy sharing about one of the authentic ahu that we have here on Kauaʻi in the Kauaʻi Museum. It is on display right now, so if you folks get a chance to go to the museum, you can check it out and see it up close to the glass, as well as the recreated full ahu'ula that you saw in the first clip. That was a recreation using pheasant feathers, and it's really a sight to see. So I highly recommend, if you're on Kauaʻi, go ahead and check it out.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Halen. Super interesting, all the stuff that he has to share. I love all the stories he has. It's super fascinating to listen to him. We are gonna now move on to hearing from Cali Crampton from the Forsberg, Kauaʻi Forsberg Recovery Project. We now heard a lot about that we are seeing little birds now in the forest. She will actually share with us what's happening there exactly with the different species and what's going on. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to share a little bit about who you are for people who don't know you. So Dr. Lisa Cali Crampton has been the project leader of the Kauaʻi Forsberg Recovery Project since 2010. She oversees research into the ecology and conservation of Kauaʻi's native forest birds. Those research projects include assessing the distribution and population trends of these species, studying the birds' diet and seed dispersal potential, implementing Birds Not Rats program to control invasive rats, and now also the Birds Not Mosquitoes program, and determining the extent of which mosquitoes, which vector deadly bird diseases have invaded the Alakai Plateau. And she will share a little bit about that today. Welcome, Cali, and you have the virtual floor.
Thank you so much for the welcome, and aloha everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you're all enjoying a nice happy hour beverage at this hour on a Friday. I'm going to show you some data. So let me just try to screen share. Give me just a sec to bring up my presentation. And these data are based on the research that Julia has alluded to that we do at the Kauaʻi Forsberg Recovery Project. So definitely takes a village. Are you seeing my screen? Yes, you are. Okay. So the question of loss in the Hawaiian forest is largely, why is it not showing you guys my next slide? It's just black, right? Is it just black?
Yes.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, is it good now? Okay. The question of loss in the Hawaiian forest context is largely driven by non-native introduced mosquito species that vector non-native diseases that are highly lethal to the Hawaiian honeycreepers, the predominant bird family in the Hawaiian forest bird community. So, as you probably know, only female mosquitoes bite. They need blood for their eggs to develop. So they take a blood meal, and when they do so, they can transmit a small pathogen from one bird to another. And in the birds, it's a lot like our COVID. They're naive to this disease. They've never encountered it in their evolutionary history. So in the case of an EEV, 9 out of 10 of them will die after a bite from a single infected mosquito. And this species, Culex quincke fasciatus, the southern house mosquito, does prefer bird blood. And it's a night active mosquito that has invaded forest bird habitat. So what the mosquitoes also can cause a second disease. They can vector a second disease, which is shown in the left-hand slide photo here, which is pox, avian pox. So there's a relationship between mosquitoes disease and climate change. As you probably all know, mosquitoes do not like it where it's cold. They like warm temperatures. So for many years now, they have flourished at sea level in the Hawaiian Islands, but have been restricted from accessing the mountainous interior of our islands because it is too cold up there. It's nice and chilly when we go to akeke'e, right? We all enjoy it up there because of that. But unfortunately, climate change is affecting that dynamic. It's making it so that on average, akeke'e is warmer and drier, which means it's easier for mosquitoes to reproduce. That may sound a little bit backwards. We all know that mosquitoes breed in stagnant water. So why does being drier up in Kauaʻi help mosquitoes? Well, it turns out that normally Kauaʻi does not have standing stagnant water. It rains all the time and streams run all the time, and it flushes all the mosquito larvae out of the streams. However, now that things are drier, we have these prolonged periods of times where water just sits in Kauai's puddles and in its streams and in other things around the akeke'e that trap water. So between warmer temperatures and drier weather, we are seeing a lot more mosquitoes up in the elevations of Kauaʻi. So mosquitoes and disease have essentially invaded forest bird habitat. And we know this because we trap for mosquitoes. So as Julia said, we monitor mosquito populations throughout the Kauaʻi. And this site here is HPK is Halapakai. It has been the bastion for the forest birds for the last 10 to 20 years. It's been the best habitat. It's high elevation, so there were very, very few mosquitoes. So I have two graphs here. One is 2018 and 2019 captures that started in September of 2018 and went through August of 2019. And you can see back then, there was this nice reprieve in the spring when we didn't catch any mosquitoes, so there was no disease transmission. It's like, I don't know, the same with us in COVID, right? Every spring we see a little break in our COVID cycles because everyone goes outside and it's nice, right? Well, birds have had a break in disease transmission cycles. Unfortunately, now the temperatures are so warm, even in the highest elevations on Kauaʻi, that this data down here is 2021 and 22 bird captures starting in February of 2021. And you can see that all through the spring of 2021, we had mosquitoes at Halapakai. So where formerly the spring months were this respite from the disease transmission, now we have disease transmission all year long. And we are seeing the same thing this year. I just haven't prepped the data yet to show you. So the consequence is what we showed you about a year ago, now this month, or maybe next month, when we did a really frightening episode about do we have enough time for Kauai's birds in our Forest Friday series. We showed you this graph, which is the number of akikiki territories found in that high elevation forest bird habitat at Halapaʻakai. So here's a beautiful little akikiki foraging for its dinner. And once upon a time being only 7 years ago, or in 2015, we had 35 breeding pairs at Halapaʻakai. It was the highest concentration of akikiki in the entire plateau. And that number dropped steadily until 2018 when we had a little bit of an uptick, which was great. We got hopeful, but as you can see, the population has been in free fall ever since, such that when I made this graph in 2021 in June for this presentation, we had 3 pairs left. And it turns out actually that 3 of those pairs weren't really pairs. Only 1 pair managed to produce a nest. And so as of December of 2021, there were only 4 akikiki at Halapaʻakai, whereas in 2015, there had been 70 to 100 akikiki at Halapaʻakai. And we know that this is due to changes in adult survival. So that's what this graph shows. So this is the same thing on the down here we have time. And then this here is the probability that an adult bird makes it from 1 year to the next. And over that same period of time, the chances that an adult bird makes it from 1 year to the next has dropped up significantly. So we are losing adult birds, we are losing the breeders. This population is in free fall, and we are correlating it with that invasion of mosquitoes. So in recognition of this sort of emergency situation, Justin and Tyler and I and Lucas Benke met, guided by Evan Paxton from USGS, to discuss all the available data for akikiki and akeke'e, another honeycreeper species that is beginning to decline really rapidly in Kauaʻi. Both of these species, by the way, are found only on Kauaʻi, nowhere else in the whole wide world. So we lose them on Kauaʻi, they're gone, right? Gone forever. And so we looked at all the available data for these 2 species to try to really wrap our heads around how many birds were actually left. And each of us independently estimated what we thought the current population size in August of 2021 was. The minimum, the most likely, and the maximum given these data, which some of them, like I said, are unpublished. So there's a little bit of uncertainty around that. And this table here is the average of our 4 opinions. So unfortunately, we thought that there may be as few as 30 akikiki left in the wild. And most likely only 45 akikiki left. And sort of at best, like most hopeful scenario across all of us, there are 75. So the published estimate for this species is 500, but that was recorded in 2018 when we had the uptick in bird numbers. And we really believe that between 2018 and 2022, we've got to this terrible situation where there are only probably 50 akikiki left in the wild. And for akeke'e, it's not quite as grave, but it's pretty bad still. Somewhere between 300 and 963 akeke'e left in the whole wide world. So this is this report that was alluded to. Maybe Julia, you can put it in the chat in a minute. A big report came out with these data that is driving a lot of things that I'm about to discuss in this talk. So we put those data together to try and predict when we thought akikiki and akeke'e would go extinct in the wild. And this is a definition of extinction that is based on population viability. So it's not no birds at all, but it's 10 females or fewer left. Because once you have 10 females or fewer left, you don't really, the population is going to implode. And so you can see that there's some differences in opinion. Some people thought it was really bad and some other people thought it was medium bad for akikiki. But overall, we thought that the population could be functionally extinct as soon as this year and almost certainly by 2023, and didn't really have a ghost of a chance beyond 2026, absent of any management intervention for akikiki. So this bird is about to go extinct in the wild. Akeke'e is slightly better. We think that akeke'e will hang in, given that it's got a larger population size to begin with, until 2025. So, you know, that would be its earliest, and more likely the rest of this decade, we would continue to see akeke'e in the wild. And so what we've all been hoping is that this mosquito birth control that is brought about by a bacteria called Wolbachia would come to the rescue in time to save this bird. So the Birds Not Mosquitoes partnership has been aggressively working on all the different steps that are needed to release mosquitoes at a landscape scale that would cause would act as birth control, would act as mosquito suppression. So the way this works is that when male mosquitoes and female mosquitoes who naturally carry this bacteria, Wolbachia, in their systems breed, the eggs are fertile, the mating is compatible. However, if male mosquitoes with a different strain of Wolbachia breed with female mosquitoes, the mating is incompatible, the eggs are unviable, so there's no second generation. So this is called the incompatible insect technique. And you can get incompatible males in a number of ways. First of all, you can go and find a different population of males than on our island that might have a naturally different strain. Or you can actually also inject bacteria into males and in the lab and rear them up. And so the idea is that we want to release enough of these incompatible males so they would block copulations with wild females. So here's a wild female with her natural strain of Wolbachia. And normally she would mate with a male that has the same strain of Wolbachia as she does, and the mating would be fertile. However, if you introduce tons and tons and tons of male with the incompatible strain, she can never basically reach the compatible male, so she never has those eggs. And this leads to population suppression. So we've been actively working on bringing this through the R&D stages, through the permitting stages, through all the regulatory hoops to fruition in the conservation context in Hawaii. It's already being used for human health across the globe. So it's a known and proven technique, but there are nonetheless some hoops to go through here with a different species of mosquito and in a different context than human health. And what we think is that we've been working through this timeline of all the permitting and all the R&D, and we are now here in 2022 where we are doing the environmental assessments needed as part of the permitting process. And this is ongoing on Kauai at this moment, and soon you will be hearing about public scoping meetings so that you can all weigh in on the process of allowing this tool to be used to save Kauai's birds. But it's going to be 2023 before we even have first field trials of this technology, and 2024 before we have any large scale releases. And when did I say akikiki would go extinct in the wild? This year maybe, and 2023 probably. So we are very, very worried that Wolbachia will not be in time for akikiki. It should, however, be in time for akeke'e, because remember 2025 was when we thought we might first start seeing akeke'e go extinct in the wild. And so we have been exploring a number of other potential management options given the timeline for not just these 2 Kauai species, but also 4 Maui species. And so down here is time, right? And here's the same data about when akikiki might go extinct in the wild portrayed in red, and same for a Maui species, and then for akeke'e, overlapping with when this IIT Wolbachia will be on the landscape. And you can see there's this big disconnect, right? And so the only tool basically that is available any sooner than 2023 is bringing akikiki into captivity. And so the recommended options for akikiki, or the proposed direction for akikiki, is to collect as many wild akikiki as possible, where as possible is a little bit TBD, depends on the biology of the birds, it depends on funding, it depends on a number of things, right? But bring as many akikiki as possible into captivity where we can keep them safe in mosquito-proof cages from mosquitoes until Wolbachia is released on the landscape, then release akikiki back into the wild. So basically you're holding them in a little bubble until things are safe for them. And then for akeke'e, because we have more time, the recommended action is to continue to monitor them in the wild. I just want to touch on something that was both Sabra and Julia have said earlier, and I think Kim too. You know, these birds are of tremendous cultural importance. Losing them is a huge loss to our forests. But what I want to just touch on quickly before I pass the torch back to Julia is that there's huge ecological, the theme of this talk is how much loss can our forests stand, right? And there's different ways of perceiving that loss. There's your personal loss, there's this cultural loss. But as a biologist, I just need to quickly speak to the ecological loss that these species make sure that our forests can regenerate. They control insect outbreaks. They provide pollination services that allow flowers to be pollinated and produce fruit, and fruit to produce seeds, which then become new shrubs and trees. And they produce they have seed dispersal services. So the forests need the birds as much as the birds need the forest. And so to me, that is one of the ways we need to capture this idea of how much loss can our forest stand? Like, when does just the whole system begin to unravel because we are missing such integral components of it? So with that, I would just like to say, please, when we do start doing EAs for birds, not mosquitoes, please come out. The birds and I will thank you for your testimony in our birds, not mosquitoes efforts. Thank you so much.
Lisa, Geraldo has a question in the chat. If you would answer it, please.
Yes, Jill or Harold, who are we? Where am I? I'm sorry, there's lots of. There's a
couple of questions. I'll read them to you real quickly.
Thank you. No, I found them here.
You did.
Would the captive akikiki come to Keaho? The current plan, given the urgent need and the existing facilities, is for them to go to Maui. That is where there are the most facilities and in the best condition to receive birds. That being said, I am actively seeking ways to develop facilities here on Kauai. And there also is a strong possibility that some of them eventually would end up at KBCC at Keaho, where we actually do currently have a couple of akikiki. So a little bit of everything, Geraldo. Would the mosquito seeding have to be ongoing? Absolutely. This is mosquito suppression. It's not eradication. We would be releasing tens of thousands of male mosquitoes, probably monthly, to usurp the copulations. And remember that only females bite. Male mosquitoes do not bite. Male mosquitoes do not need a blood meal for their eggs to develop. They actually are pollinators. So nectarivores. So, but yes, this is going to be an ongoing management operation. Are there any other?
Yes, there is a question about cats.
Cats, yes. Cats are an issue for native forest birds. It depends a little bit on the species, but we have observed feathers and feet of birds in cat scat throughout the Alakai, including at Halapakai, like the deepest, darkest Alakai. I don't think it's particularly dark, but and we believe we had cat predation on a puaiohi nest earlier this year. So yes, cats are a problem for the native forest birds. Matthew, Good to see you. I think that the EA will be largely broadcast on both DNLR, Kauai Forest Bird and Birds Not Mosquito websites and social media. Luca, do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe put them in the chat.
You might want to repeat the question, Callie.
So Luca, the question is, where will the EA be posted? Like, where will the public notices be posted? So
can people comment, yeah, on them?
And then the other thing is, I don't know, let me just go, I'll just put one more website in the chat if I can. I was going to put the one that the Fish and Wildlife Service developed to deal with this report and the framework. And some of this actually, the EA might end up posted there as well, because that is the website that Fish and Wildlife Service has developed for these 4 species and the ongoing efforts to work on them. So that's here.
Okay. Awesome. Are there any other questions on Facebook? I don't know if Helen had a chance to check. Okay, no questions. Okay, perfect. It's 5 o'clock, but I would like to spotlight Justin Haidt, who's also here, and we are lucky to have him here because he is actually the field supervisor at KFBRP. Hi, Justin. And he is actually working directly with those birds, and I love to have him here because he can tell us a little bit how that feels and what experience like it is to be in the field with these birds. And so one of the questions that I wanted to ask him is that, so he spends a lot of time, you spend a lot of time with the birds in the forest. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Like,
yeah. Well, thank you all for coming. And this is kind of fun to be here. And this is, yeah, full field season. So kind of much of the last 2 months, I guess, I've been up in the Kauaʻi. And I would just, I think, like, probably speak on behalf of, like, you know, all of our field crew. Like, this is, we feel just amazingly, like, humbled and lucky to be able to do this kind of work. I mean, we get to, like, live in the Kauaʻi, like deep inside there, and interact on a daily basis with some of the rarest birds in the world. And then not only are they, like, rare, but some of them are, like, ridiculously gorgeous. Like, kind of actually getting to, like, kind of hang out with EEV is regularly is a real treat. We kind of joke that they're more like, you know, demigods or something, and not really birds. And listening to them sing is just this ridiculous, crazy thing, because they don't really sing like a normal bird. It's all like honks and squeaks and weirdnesses, and just being able to have that kind of be the normal background to what's going on is pretty awesome. And then just really spending time with akikiki, like kind of just one of the most you know, incredibly rare. I mean, we're really thinking, I think we've found 6 breeding pairs this year. We don't think there's really that many more on the island. And so that's kind of, you know, what's left really in the world. And having them just straight up not be shy or uncommon in these areas. I mean, we just go to them and then they're just like all over right in front of you. Like, I was just like shooting a cell phone video of them as they're like hopping around right next to me. I think they're just kind of, you know, one would assume that, like, kind of with, you know, like, the pretty birds did learn somewhat to fear the humans and the bird catchers, but things like akikiki, you know, they kind of lucked out in having, you know, no one wanted to really probably make a cape out of akikiki. And so they're like, what's up? Or they don't even say that, they just don't really care. So you hang out with them and they're totally indifferent to you. It's as if you're just, you know, a pig or something. So I don't know. And then just one of the kind of the glory, just, oh my God, there's so many things that are great about it. But one little thing, I think, like, puaiohi nests, correct me if I'm wrong, I think like the puaiohi was the last species sort of described by scientists in Hawaii before the po'ouli on Maui, like the one described in the 70s. So like the puaiohi was one of the very last ones discovered. And it's just because Hawaii or Kauai had the kama'o, the large Kauai thrush. And so I think they were just, those were everywhere. I think they were supposed to be one of the most abundant birds on the island. So maybe the poo just sort of like slipped among the cracks there, but they were also just always really rare and always just maybe way back in the Kaua'i And I think the first nest wasn't discovered until something much more recent. I can't remember, but we have an average day for a lot of our field crew is like kind of checking 15 puaiohi nests in a day, and they're just on these fern walls that are each one more overwhelmingly beautiful than the last, like the little waterfalls and the drips. And I've just been dreaming of like having an art exhibit that's just like cell phone photos of 200 puaiohi walls and like printing them out big and small and filling a room so people can just be like, this is Kauai. Like this is what the puaiohi is. And this is my last one. Oh yeah, that would be fun. And then just one little quick story. Phoebe and Bo and I were up at on Kauai Stream last week, and we were kind of just trying to find this trying to check out this area that had akikiki 4 years ago when we'd spent some time there, and we quickly found one of the adults, which we had actually banded. Maria and I and Bryn had banded it in 2018, and it was still there, like in the same territory. We didn't even know if it was a male or female back then. We kind of had never been able to figure it out. But all of a sudden, there she is acting exactly like a female. The mate's with her, and he's singing even, which is incredibly rare. And so that's all happening. And then we realized like he's singing and all this is happening because they have a tiny little baby that had just fledged. So it was just itsy bitsy and was hopping around a little. It could barely fly, and it was just in the tree even above us. We were sort of just lucky to have happened upon being right there. And then like the dad, like the female leaves, and the dad comes in, he feeds the baby, and then he goes and leaves. And the baby's like, wait, I want to follow. And so the baby flies after the dad. And I think we were even looking away. I was like watching the male leave. And then I just sort of saw a little bird fly poorly above me, land technically in an alani bush in front of me, and then fall out of it because it's just a baby and it can't really do it well. So it just sort of tumbled downwards to the ground. And so there Phoebe and I are with all of our banding kit stuff, and a baby akikiki just falls out of the sky. And it was like, Phoebe, we need to get this. And so we circled around and came in slow, and she plucked it up off the ground. And we were just joking that like, like these things are so rare, so incredibly rare, yet where we are working in the life we get to kind of have up there is like, it is raining baby akikiki.
Make a song about them.
Yeah. So those are, our emotions are always high and low.
Well, that's awesome. I love listening to all these stories. I think we should have a Forest Friday just with Justin talking about his field work. Yeah, I see thumbs up. I think we probably should do that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think the last question I want to ask you, and I know that people who joined in here today, they already care a lot about these birds, but what should we tell people, like from your perspective, why should people care about these birds that are out there?
Excuse me, that was the dog. I think what's kind of funny is I think I think I'm a deeply optimist yet pessimist. I think I'm very strong in both directions. So in some ways I'm like, it's hard for me to explain to other people why they should care. Like they're great, they're cool. I love them. They're neato. They're super rare, they're important, but like, this is like, in the end, there are many things, like what is that Game of Thrones, the night is dark and full of terrors. Like it's crazy. There's so many things that are coming. Like we don't have a good track record with the honey creepers. I kind of believe that like sort of, I don't know that any honey creeper in Hawaii has ever started increasing numbers again after declining. I think like we just have a story of them declining and going extinct. So I just have a real hard, I think there's just a lot of inherent sadness here of just, kind of watching this happen and hoping against hope that the last few akikiki won't be the very last ones, and as they slip on to just not really being here anymore. But that's the thing, is I guess that's why they're important, is if we think it's important that we have them in the world, I mean, we're at the end. Like this is, we got to do something about it now. There's
now or never. Yeah,
now or never. There's no more time. And just the great thing about the mosquitoes, like it really might be too late for akikiki. I mean, like these mosquitoes might not come in time, but like the anianiao, like the picture of the one behind Julia there, like the exact same fate is coming for anianiao in 10 or 20 years. Like there is no escaping without mosquito control. That is going to go the same direction as the akikiki. There will be a few dozen left. We'll have fun little nicknames for them. We'll be really sad, and then they'll be gone too. So like we need the mosquitoes really can save, I think, the other ones. And maybe we were too late for akikiki, but we're not too late for anianiao. So that is like, can definitely be the success story. And akikiki can be our little like never forget mascot bird.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We have the saying, extinction is forever, endangered means we still have time, right?
Yeah.
Time is running out. There's 2 questions in the chat. Can I come volunteer? And what can individuals do? So maybe Cali, I don't know if you want to chime in with that.
Question was, can I volunteer?
Yeah.
What can we do? I guess they're kind of related, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, volunteering of all sorts is welcomed at KFBRP, and I don't know where these people are located and what their skill sets are. For the places that Justin has been describing, we do only quite long, rigorous camping field trips. So if you are up for that, and especially if you want to come and help us trap mosquitoes or trap rats or any of those things, and you can spare a week of your time, you are welcome. But there's also plenty of things that other people can do who cannot commit to that kind of time or don't have the inclination to go into the deepest, darkest alakai. Which, you know, I think there's a list of those things on our website, but they include helping us around the office, or they include helping us if you're not here on Kauai, sorting photos. Like we have this tremendous lift to sort all these data from all these camera traps that we have out in the alakai that are helping us study the birds. Thank you, Kim, for posting that link. And then as far as helping more generally, I mean, climate change is the elephant in the room as far as these birds go. So every little step you take everywhere in your life to help reduce your climate footprint and to help influence climate policy in what I think is the right direction, which is reducing our overall fossil fuel output in this planet, will help these birds. And like similarly, everything that you help to think about biosecurity when you're moving to and from and within the Hawaiian Islands will help these birds. So what does biosecurity mean? It means don't introduce invasive species. So always checking your gear, always cleaning your gear, always washing the underside of your car. Kim, the rod expert, can give you lots more tips about how to not introduce raparuhia death into our forest, but it's seeds, it's everything. And it's not bringing things to the Hawaiian Islands. And then, of course, there's also, as I alluded earlier, we're going to have this EA. We need people to speak up in the EA. There are permit measures coming up all the time to allow us to import these trans-infected, incompatible males. We need your voices for the birds. So I think Julia puts it really well. We have to give the birds a voice because, first of all, they don't speak English. But second, I mean, they are going quiet. The forests are exceedingly quiet, and we have to start making the noise that they used to make to save them, because that's what it's going to take, a whole lot of noise from a whole lot of people who care. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Kim and Halen, any more questions that you found somewhere in the chat or Facebook?
I would just like to share an update on, since Cali mentioned raparuhia death and ohia. The latest news on the ohia front is that sitting on the governor's desk is the bill to sign that will declare ohia the Hawaii state endemic tree. So just another way to bring focus, awareness, attention to our forests and the importance of our forests across Hawaii. So I just wanted to share that. Hopefully within the next week or two, it will get signed and we can start declaring ohia this Hawaii state endemic tree.
That sounds great. We have another clip from Chucky Boy that we would like to share. Halen, are you ready for that?
Yes, I know we're a little bit over time, but mahalo for staying, everybody. And I know that it is very sad to think, you know, that we're losing our birds. But to leave on a positive note, Uncle Chucky Boy had shared a very powerful message that I'd like to share with you all. And let me just pull that up real quick.
One of the main components about being a separate kingdom is geographic. We're separated by the longest channel, the channel. Throughout the Hawaiian chain, it's the longest channel in it. But other reasons why Kauaʻi is a separate kingdom, let's put it this way. What's unique about Kauaʻi? It's I think a better term here. Kauaʻi Puleʻo. Molokai Puleʻo. Puleʻo. You know, it's Kauaʻi is strong prayer. Molokai is strong prayer. The other answer happens. And I like to think that have this invisible bubble with Kauaʻi, and we hope. And I love the meaning of Kauaʻi of strong. It's correct. Even today, our me homes, they continue to be the prayer warriors, right?
So to leave you with that, Kauaʻi Puleʻo, meaning Kauaʻi of strong prayer. So mahalo for Kauaʻi Forest Birds Recovery Project for doing all of your work to save our species and our ecosystems, and all of the amazing people that Kim and I get to partner with and work with. And yes, just wanted to leave you with that Kauaʻi is known for its strong prayer, and the people of Kauaʻi have strong prayer.
Mahalo, Helen, for sharing this, and mahalo everybody for joining us today, especially thanks to Kumu Sabra, to Justin and Cali, Chucky Boy Chuck, of course, Kumu Keahi, who did the opening, and I'm also going to share a closing in a second. I hope you all learned something new and enjoyed the presentations. We have a little exit survey. Once you leave, please fill it out. We love to get some feedback from you. Don't worry if you missed any of our previous Forest Friday episodes. They're all on YouTube and you can watch them at any time. So go to either the KISC YouTube channel or the KFBRP YouTube channel. They're all there. One announcement, our next Forest Friday will be after summer break, sometime in August. The exact date is TBA. Please keep an eye out for our newsletter or social media. We will send it out as soon as we have a date set, and we will inform you what's going to happen. And yeah, thank you again for being here. And to close this out, I'm going to share some words from Kumu Keahi.
Mahalo ka pā olu mai o ka makani ke ia awina la me nā leo I hupani I ho'i ke maila. Mahalo a nui e nā hoa kipa hano o kauka lawa o Chucky Boy no ka ike vai. Mahalo a nui e nā hoa ka ko'o manu a pau I a koa mai nei. A hui ho aku kākou I ka wāku pono. Aloha.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Aloha, ahui ho.
All right.